everyone. First of all, I apologize for the audio situation. That's a tough one, and I'm sorry about that. I really am. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Yash. I'm a hopeful data science learner. I want to learn data science, and so, but due to variety of circumstances, some of which were my own fault, because of my own bad habits of procrastination and general laziness. I never built any consistency. I would do it for a few days, and then sometimes I would make excuses. Sometimes certain family situations came around, and that threw me off. And so, you know ultimately, these are things that you are responsible for. And I do want to achieve some of these goals of mine. So these streams are a way of me holding myself accountable. And also a way of building some consistency. Sorry about that. I can't imagine what you are going through. I am. These are hurting my ears. Can't imagine what you are going through. Really, these streams are a way of building consistency, and also to show people who themselves struggle with things like discipline and consistency and procrastination. I want to be an example, but more than that, I want to show you that you're not the only one struggling with these things. And hopefully I can be that example for you, and hopefully I can achieve the things that I want to achieve by doing those things. So this is what we are going to do. Last stream we familiarized ourselves with the basics of SQL, as some people call it. Last stream we did those things, and today we are going to study group by statements. And we are not going to study. I'm not going to teach you. I'm going to learn them myself. I've had a brief overview of it, but I don't know the whole of it. So this is what we are going to do. We are going to learn through a Udemy course. So let's get started. Okay. So this is.
Welcome everyone to this section on group by. In this section, we're going to be discussing group by and aggregate functions. Group by is a SQL statement that will allow us to aggregate data and apply functions to better understand how data is distributed per category. In this section, we're first going to begin by discussing aggregate functions without any group by application.
Hardware acceleration is turned off. I'm sorry about that, people. I'm fucking up a lot today, huh? Oh, jeez. Okay, let's see if it works now. Let's see if it works now. Okay, it's working.
Part 2 will actually show you some implementation of group by statements in pgadmin with pgsql. Welcome everyone. This section on group by. In this section, we're going to be discussing group by and aggregate functions. Group by is a SQL statement that will allow us to aggregate data and apply functions to better understand how data is distributed per category. In this section, we're first going to begin by discussing aggregate functions without any group by applications. Then, we'll learn about group by. With part 1, we'll just discuss the theory behind it, and then in part 2 I'll actually show you some implementation. Welcome back everyone. Before we discuss group by operations, we should understand aggregate functions in general. SQL provides a variety of aggregate functions, and PostgreSQL is no exception to that. And all the functions we see here are available in any major SQL engine. The main idea behind an aggregate function is to take multiple inputs and return a single output. Now, PostgreSQL provides many different types of aggregate functions, and you can check out the link in this slide in order to go to the official documentation page. But we're just going to discuss the most common aggregation functions in this particular lecture. The most common aggregate functions are average, which returns the average value or mean value. There's count, which we're actually already familiar with, returns the number of values or rows returned. Then there's max and min, which return maximum and minimum respectively.
For those of you who want to take notes of this, you can take notes right now. Right now, I already have access to this course, so if I want to write them down, I will. But I like to practice, and then we will go from there.
And then there's sum, which returns the sum of all the values, so it adds everything up in that particular column. Keep in mind that aggregate function calls happen only in the select clause or the having clause. We don't know about the having clause quite yet, but we're going to learn about it later on in this section. Some special notes to keep in mind for certain particular aggregate functions is the average call returns a floating point value many decimal places long. So for example, it could be something like 2.342418, etc. And you can use the round function on top of average to specify precision after the decimal. So we'll see that in this particular lecture. And keep in mind that count simply returns the number of rows, which means by convention we could just use count asterisk in order to see the number of rows. We can either pass in a specific column or just an asterisk, since it's essentially the same thing. But we've already discussed that before. Let's go ahead and see some examples of aggregate functions in our own database. Then head over to pgadmin now. Alright, let's begin by exploring the film table, since we'll be using that. So we'll say select everything from film, and if we run this, we can see we have a film ID, title, description, and then release year, language ID, and we also have this replacement cost. Notice we have several values here. Let's imagine right off the bat, I wanted to know what the minimum replacement cost was. Well, what I could do is call my aggregate function, and then I'm going to call parentheses, since this is a function call, and I call it on that column, replacement cost. And when I run this, it's going to return back the minimum replacement cost. So at a minimum, we're going to have to spend $9.99 to replace a certain film. Now that also means certain films are more expensive. So maybe we have a budgeting question asking, what's the most we can expect to...
I'm sorry about how this, I think that all that acceleration stuff, I think that's like the consequence, like it's glitching every now and then. And so I'm sorry about that's happening, that's an issue for you. It's certainly an issue for me.
Pay to replace a film.
This is
in that case, we can just call max and figure out the maximum replacement cost. So the maximum replacement cost now reported back is $29.99. So that is the min and max function, pretty self-explanatory, and you can call them just on any column here. Keep in mind, if we were to try to call something else, like let's say I also wanted to call a film ID column for some reason, that doesn't really make sense. And the reason for that is we're just actually calling an aggregate function on a column, which means max replacement cost just returns a single value. So it doesn't really make sense to call another column with this. In order to call other columns, we'll have to learn about the group by statement, which is coming up next. So keep that in mind When you're doing just simple calls or queries like this, where we want to figure out the min or max, it doesn't really make sense to call other columns there, since we're aggregating a bunch of values to just a single value. What you could do is something like min replacement cost from film, and we run this, and that works. And the reason this works is because that function, maximum, and this function, minimum, are both returning a singular value. So this will be the max and min for your replacement cost. So keep in mind, because those rows happen to match up, that sort of query makes sense. Okay, let's explore the other aggregate functions we talked about. We're already familiar with count, which is essentially just counting the number of rows returned. So we can say select count in asterisk, run that, and it returns back how many rows we have. So we have 1,000 films. And keep in mind, this works on any column. So we could also say film ID, and that's essentially the same thing. Since that's
Okay, so we do get the gist.
case by convention, we typically just write an asterisk there, and we're already familiar with count. Let's imagine we wanted to know the average replacement cost. What I could do is say average replacement cost, run that, and that's going to grab the mean or average from the film table. However, you probably notice it looks a little strange here, and that's because by default, this average call gives you a lot of significant digits. So if we expand this column, notice how I'm stretching it out here, we can see that it's actually 19.984 and then a bunch of zeros. So realistically, you probably don't want all these significant digits past the decimal point. So what we can do is wrap this around with a round function, and the round function actually takes in two parameters. One is the value you actually want to round, and then we're going to put a comma here and how many decimal places we want to round it to. So we'll say to 2 decimal places. And this is essentially a mathematical call on this result. So it's going to take this result and then round it to just 2 places past the decimal. And then when I run this, notice I get back $19.98 as the average replacement cost from the film. And we can always edit this if for some reason we wanted 3 decimal places. We can run that and it keeps going. If I said 4, as you may have guessed, it'll start including the 0. So you can either stretch out this column to see all the results if you don't have that rounding call, or realistically you're probably going to want to round this to some degree. Again, notice how round uses parentheses in order to organize its parameters or its inputs. Here we have the input that we're trying to round, and then the second parameter is how many decimal places. So we discussed average, count, max, and min, and then we finally have sum, which is going to sum all the values in a column. So what does that actually mean? If we take a look at our table again, select everything from film, let's imagine for some reason we had to replace every single film. So we were opening a duplicate store and had to replace every single film. So we needed to figure out the total sum of the replacement cost. Welcome back, everyone, to part 1 of our lecture series of Group By. Group By allows us to aggregate columns per some category. Let's first explore this idea with a simple example, and then we'll go over the SQL syntax. Let's imagine we have the following table. We have some sort of category column. Here we have A's, B's, and C's, and then some data value associated with them, such as 10, 5, 2, etc. We can imagine that maybe the category here stands for some sort of company.
I'm sorry about this. I have to do something. Sorry everyone. Let's get back to this. Alright.
Data value is how much we sold to that company. So we had one deal of $10 for company A, later on we had a $5 deal for company A, then the $2 deal for company B, and so on. So when we're actually performing a group by, there's a couple of key things to consider. The first is this category column. We need to choose a categorical column to perform the group by on. That is to say, categorical columns are non-continuous, or at least we're treating them as non-continuous for the sake of the group by. Now something to keep in mind is these can actually still be numerical, such as cabin class categories on a ship, class 1, 2, 3, and so on. And you should also keep in mind that they actually may appear continuous, but you could treat them as a category. For example, if you recall to our DVD rental database, we have different rental rates available, such as 99 cents, $1.99, $2.99, etc. We could treat each of those rental rates as its own.
You know what? I'll adjust this a little bit.
own separate class or own separate category. So just because something is being treated as categorical doesn't necessarily mean it's non-numeric. And we're going to see different examples of that in the next lecture when we actually program out in SQL some group by statements. But let's first go through the idea of what a group by actually does and how it relates to aggregate function calls. So the way a group by operates is the following. We have already chosen our categorical column. Then what we're going to do is essentially split this table up on a per category basis. So we have everything that went with category A, then B, then C. And then we have the corresponding data values. Recall that an aggregate function takes in multiple values and reduces them back down to one single value, such as the sum function can take in all these values per category or grouped by category and then return back their sum. So the total sum of sales to category A was 15, 6 to B, and then 18 to C. And we could do this with any of the aggregate functions that we just learned about. For example, we could take the average data value per category, 7.5, 3, and 9. We can even do something like a count per category. In this case, there was 2 rows per category, so they're all the same, 2, 2, and 2. So let's actually explore the general syntax. So the most basic group by all looks like this. We select some sort of category column or something we've deemed to be categorical, and then we choose to perform some aggregate function on the data column. So AGG here is just some placeholder for some aggregate function on some data column. We select it from the table, and then immediately after that, we call group by that category column. So the group by clause must appear right after a from statement or right after a where statement. So if you want, before you do the group by, you can filter things out using a where statement. Essentially saying something like where category column is not equal to A. Essentially ignoring all the A categories before we went ahead and did the group by. So the thing to keep in mind is the group by either has to come directly after a from statement or directly after a where statement. Now, one of the most important things to realize when learning about group by is the following. In the actual select statement, columns must either have an aggregate function call on them or be themselves in the group by call. So what does that actually mean? This is where beginners often get tripped up in learning about group by, so pay close attention to this one.
Pay close attention.
So if we're using a group by statement, then if we're selecting that particular column just by itself, it must be included in the group by statement. So notice here, I've decided to select the category column, then that particular column must also appear in the group by statement. The only exception to this is if I'm calling some sort of aggregate function on the column itself. So in this case, because I'm aggregating something on the data column, it does not need to be included in the group by statement. So let's imagine a different example. We can have something like select company, division, and then sum of sales. So you can imagine we had 3 columns in this table. One were different companies, and then the divisions within that company, and then different sales per division per company. So what we're doing here is, again, notice that if I'm selecting a column, such as company and division, then they must also appear in the group by statement. So that means we can group by multiple columns, and we essentially just decide the order to group by, in a very similar fashion that we decided the ordering of different columns when we learned about the order by statement. So again, here I'm selecting column and division. Since they don't have an aggregate,
I don't really I don't think I fully understand it, so I'll experiment a little. Let's see what happens. Okay, so let's say that we go with let's go with payment. Yes, let's go with payment. Payment, right? So press F5. We have this. Okay. So say we go with select amount do we have the syntax right? Yeah, we have the syntax right. Let's see what we get. If we do this, yeah, it doesn't work. Why is it not working?
Function, they must appear in the group by clause. Notice again the sales doesn't appear in the group by statement, which means it must have an aggregate function associated with it. So essentially what this is returning is the total sum of sales per division per company. And keep in mind that the where statements should not refer to the aggregation result. So you shouldn't be trying to do any filtering using a where statement on sum of sales in this case. Later on, we are going to learn how to do that using the having statement to filter on those results. But for right now, if you are using a where statement, aggregate. So notice what we're doing here is we're saying select company division sum of sales from finance table, where division is in marketing and transport. Essentially, filtering out the divisions before we actually perform the group by on the company and division. And again, notice here, company and division appear in the group by. Sales does not because it has the aggregate function associated with it. Here's another example that if you want to sort the results based on the aggregate, you have to make sure to reference the entire function. So in a simpler example here, let's say we wanted to sum the sales, total sales.
Maybe I'm not getting it. Let's ask ChatGPT, how do you its role in aggregating database. Every column in the select list that is not part of it must appear in the group by clause. The group by clause groups rows with the same values in the specified column. I don't think this will work either. I don't think this is how it's supposed to work. I'm just experimenting, seeing like again it's not going to work. I understood that much. Like I don't think like the kind of data I don't think these are the compatible data types. I don't think that is why I think it's not working. Okay. see if this works. Okay. Well, let's see. Like, I think that I'm getting the hang of it, but I have to like experiment a little more for me to like truly get it. Okay. Customer ID, address, ID, and no, this isn't it. Let's see. Film, language ID, rental rate, replacement cost. Like, if we have, let's like ask a legitimate question, right? Every column that is not part of an aggregate must appear in the group by clause. The group like a row is the same value as that column in the single row for each row. Product ID, region, sum, sale, not as total sales.
Per company. Then we could select company, some of those sales from the table. We will group by company. And then the other thing to notice here is if I actually wanted to order by the sum of sales, I don't just say order by sales, I have to say order by the sum of sales. So notice that whatever I'm ordering by, that total statement should exist somewhere in that select clause. And then you could add something like limit 5. Pending order. Just learn through practice. So I'll see you in part 2 in the next lecture where we actually practice on our own DVD rental database. Welcome everyone to part 2 of our lecture series on the Welcome back everyone to this lecture for group by state tasks. Let's go ahead and jump to our database and work through some group by examples section. As always, we'll have the challenge presented, then the expected result. We'll give you hints if you need them, and then we'll go over the solution. Your first challenge task goes as follows. We have 2 staff members with staff IDs 1 and 2. We want to give a bonus to the staff so we can actually build in some practice into creating a query that would work with a query that handled the... I'm going to...
What exactly is going on? What the fuck?
Those payments. Just Graham at pgadmin. First, what I'm going to do is explore the payment table. I'm going to do this just Graham at pgadmin. First, what I'm going to do is explore the payment table. I'm going to do this just here. It's not so bad to just explore it. It looks like the payment table, we have a payment ID, so it's a unique identifier by saying select everything from the payment table. Typically, we wouldn't do this, but since we have a small table, the number, this is essentially the actual customer ID. So this is customer 341, and you can see he's visited multiple times and rented out multiple things. And he had different interactions with different staff. So we also have a staff ID, which is also a numeric, but we can treat it as a class. Since it's a kind of a category here, we can think of this almost as the name of the staff person. In the same way we can think of customer ID as here we have kind of a named identifier per customer. Then we have the rental ID here, essentially what movie was actually rented. Later on we'll learn how to join this rental ID column to the actual film column to see what actual film is being rented. And then we have the amount on that particular transaction as well as the payment date. So let's do the simplest group by possible, which is to group together the actual customer IDs. So what does that actually mean? Well, I could say select customer ID from payments, group by customer ID. So if I run this, this is actually essentially the same thing as selecting the distinct customer IDs. This is a bit of a roundabout way to go about it, but if you think what we're doing here, we're just kind of aggregating all the customer IDs together. And we're not performing any aggregate functions on any other columns, so we just get this list of customer IDs. And if I wanted to, I could add an order by statement here to order by that same column. And essentially, I just get the customer IDs here that we have in the payment table in order. So nothing too crazy here. And this is not a typical use case for group by, but it's the simplest group by possible of just selecting the column and then grouping by it, which is actually the same as essentially selecting the distinct values of the column. What's probably more helpful is to do this in conjunction with an aggregate function on another column. Let's imagine I wanted to answer the question, what customer is spending the most money in total? Well, what I could do is take the sum of the amount column in conjunction with grouping by customer ID. So if I run this, I can now see the total sum that every customer spent. And then, if I wanted to actually order this, I would say
we were on the right track, yeah? By the way, let's try this again.
खड़े यहाँ गए इंची तक रखे
कौन सा चाहिए?
16 इंची तक रखे तो दुकाने जाएगा मतलब आज या कल दुकाने जाएगी तो खाली सिर्फ पता लगा लें
payment group by customer ID.
Order by, and I can't just say order by amount, I have to say order by the sum amount, since that is truly what this column is. It's not just the amount column, it's a total sum of the amount column per customer ID. And a lot of times the word per really helps beginners understand what the group by is doing. So I can read this as the total sum amount per customer ID. And I'm going to run this, and now I can see this in order. And we can change it from ascending to descending if we want, with ASC or DESC. And this is a very typical SQL query that is using group by to answer a real question. What customer ID?
You know what? Let's go with the challenges. I don't like. Let's see that. If we can get this much right.
Welcome back everyone to this lecture for your challenge tasks for the group by section of the course. As always, we'll have the challenge presented, then the expected result. We'll give you hints if you need them, and then we'll go over the solution. Your first challenge task goes as follows.
We have two staff members with staff IDs 1 and 2. We want to give a bonus to the staff. Enter the most payments. Most in terms of number of payments, not total dollars. Select star. There are only two staff working here. That makes sense actually. So let's see. payment. Payment ID, customer ID, staff ID, rental ID. How many payments did each staff member handle and who gets the bonus? Select select this isn't going to work. This is not going to work. Let's see. Okay, let's go with this. Select payment ID. Customer ID. Payment ID. Group by staff ID. Let's see if this works. It still didn't work. What happened? Didn't do. Okay, let's do this again. Okay, let's turn this around. Okay, so if we do this, maybe this will help. I don't think this is right.
मजा आ रहा है ना, लग रहा है काशीपुरा में आ गए।
I don't think this is right. Let's see. Oh yes, we can do that. Yes. Customer ID and count. Let's see if we got this right.
We have two staff members with staff IDs 1 and 2. We want to give a bonus to the
Oh, there you go. Wow.
and for payments, which was more than staff ID number 1. So staff ID number are etc. What is the average replacement?
The relationship between replacement cost and a movie MPA rating. What is the average replacement cost per MPA? Fill. So So this would be, I think this is how it's going to go. So you take select rating, replacement cost, and from film group by ratings. This is, I think, how it's going to go. I think. So let's see. Okay, so according to this, okay, and then you go order by so PG-13 makes the most profit, though it has the most highest replacement cost, and PG has the least replacement cost. Wow.
Cost per MPAA rating. Note, you may need to expand the average column to view the correct results. Okay, here comes the expected result. So the expected result should look something like this. We have a rating, and then its associated average replacement cost per rating. Here comes some hints. The hint is to use the film table, and to also recall that average returns back many significant digits. So you can either stretch out the column as you just saw, or you can use the round function to fix this issue. And here comes the solution. So the solution is to select the rating column, and then apply the average function on the replacement cost column from the film table, and then group by rating. As we previously mentioned, the just average function produces many significant digits past the decimal point. So if you wanted to, you could pass this into round, and then only select 2 places past the decimal. And here's our last challenge. We're running a promotion to reward our top 5 customers with coupons. What are the customer IDs of the top 5
payment. So these are the customer IDs of those 5 individuals who spend way too much money on movies.
Customers based off total expenditure or total spend. That is the actual. So the expected results are these 5 customer IDs, and here are their total amount expenditures. They should feel pretty familiar. We did something very similar to this
I was
during the
worried I
actual
would make
lecture.
an ass of myself in
Here's some
front
hints
of
in case you need
everyone.
them. So the hints are to use the payment table and use order by.
Let's go with next, let's go with this having keyword function. Sorry.
Welcome back, everyone. In this lecture, we're going to discuss the having clause. The having clause allows us to filter after an aggregation has already taken place, so it comes after a group by call. Let's take a look back at one of our previous examples. Let's imagine to filter after an aggregation has already taken place, so it comes after a group by call. Let's take a look back at one of our previous examples. Let's imagine this very simple query where we're selecting some sort of company column and then taking the sum of the sales column from some financial table where we group by company. So we're aggregating sales per company. Now we've already seen we can filter before executing the group by with a where statement. For example, here I could put a where right before my group by and say where company not equal to Google, because maybe I don't want to include Google in my final results. So that's okay because the company isn't being aggregated in any sort of way. It is in the group by statement. However, it's not having an aggregate function being called on it. So I can use where. But what if we actually wanted to filter based off the sum sales? So keep in mind that since we're calling sum on sales, that's not going to happen until after that group by statement is executed all the way at the bottom, which means we cannot use where to filter based off aggregate results. But what if we actually wanted to filter based off the sum sales? So keep in mind that since we're calling sum on sales, that's not going to happen until after that group by statement is executed all the way at the bottom, which means we cannot use where to filter based off aggregate results, because those happen after the actual where statement is executed. So, if after performing the group by and calculating the sum of sales per company, I wanted to then perform an additional filter on that result based off the sum of sales, I could add the having clause. So having allows us to use the aggregate result as a filter along with the group by. So you can essentially think of this as a where statement, but only for something that is being aggregated through the group by. And hopefully you can see that connection quite clearly here. So again, here I'm able to now filter.
I think I get the gist of it. Let's go with the challenging tasks. I do think I get it, or I don't. We'll see.
Everyone, and as always, we have the challenge, the expect assign platinum status to customer.
Service for our most work and we will assign platinum status as 40 or more transaction payment. What customer ID? Okay. Customer ID for more than we are launching a plan for customers that have had 40 or more transaction payments. customer ID. Okay, so let's do something wrong first, yeah. Let's see if it really doesn't work. So payment ID, count payment ID, group by let's see if it doesn't work. It doesn't ये हो गया. This having greater than equal to 4. So these are the 3 individuals who spend way too much. Okay, got it. Let's see if we have
that have had 40 or more transaction payments. What customer IDs are eligible for platinum status? Okay, here comes the expected result. So the expected result are these 3 customer IDs. And if you want, you can also show how many transactions they had. We can see here that there's 3 people that have had 40 or more transactions. Here's some hints in case you need them. And then we're going to grab this from the payment table, group by the customer ID, and then we're going to say having a count greater than or equal to 40. Essentially answering the question that they've had 40 or more payment rows associated with that particular customer ID, thus earning them that platinum status. Alright, your next challenge is to answer the following. What are the customer IDs of customers who have spent more than $100 in payment transactions with our staff ID member number 2? Again, that's
That's a mouth. Select what are the customers who have spent more than select customer ID some amount. Okay, so we are going, and then we are going to group by customer ID where staff ID is equal to 2 having some amount greater than equal to 100. Let's see if it works. I think this is where we messed up, maybe. Let's see if it works. So if we take this, let's see if it works. It works, yeah. Customer ID, these people, they are fan of the number 2 so much.
For IDs of people who have spent more than $100 in payment transactions, but only with the payment transactions that occurred with the staff ID number 2. Here comes the expected result. So there should be only 5 customers that have done this, and then here's the associated sum. So they're all over $100 here. Upcoming are some hints. So
Okay.
customer ID having a sum amount of greater than 100. Alright, and that's it for your challenge tasks. I'll see you at the next lecture.
Okay, so that's really it for us as well. You know what, like, we might as well do the assessment test as well.
Hello everyone, welcome to your first assessment test. We've actually had a lot of challenges along the way, so this isn't going to be a very long assessment test. It's actually just going to be 3 quick questions, and it's also going to be in article lecture format. So you won't see any videos, you'll just get the actual text of the...
Return the customer IDs who have spent at least... we have done this, so there is no point in doing this again. But you know what, we might as well. Return the customer IDs of customers who have spent at least $110 this time.